God, I'm not going to touch any of these buttons. There's too many buttons. I feel like I'm going to break something.
All right, if you heard that voice, that means we are back. Maybe.
Ah!
Potentially. It looks like we did it. Okay.
Woo!
We stayed
All right,
connected.
awesome.
Everybody.
I just want to point out that one of the things that's making me very uncomfortable is I don't have a giant post-it note telling me where to look. So I don't actually know where I'm going. Right there?
Right at that camera right there.
There you go. Yeah, wave for me. Just stand there.
Look
okay,
at Taylor. But guys,
they have to make it really idiot-proof in our studio because like we don't really know what's going on. So if you ever visit, if you ever see it, there's literally a giant post-it note with 3 big like Sharpie arrows that tells you where to look, and it moves based on where they want you to go.
something we should probably get around to doing. We're always looking off camera.
You guys are professionals. It's in the title.
Well, we're casuals about it though.
Yeah, but still professionals.
But guys, we are joined by Mr. Will Shick from AMG. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been a crazy busy show, and it's only like halfway through day 2.
Yeah, we're not even into the weekend yet.
I know. Saturday's supposed to be the really wild event.
Correct. So yeah, we're still kind of in that warm up to Adepticon. But we are here to talk about some Shatterpoint. So this is the first time you've been running demos for Shatterpoint as far as like kind of the grand scheme of things, right?
As I'm contractually required and obligated to say because of our marketing director, Liz Piotr, it is the world premiere of Shatterpoint demos. The world premiere.
So is there something specific about Adepticon that kind of made that the place to kind of reveal that to the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things, right? Like one, the timing just worked really well with the release happening in this, it's expected to be in June, but this summer. But the other thing too is like, I mean, you can't really ask for a better venue in the States for world premiering a new miniatures game, right? Like Adepticon is one of those unique shows where it's just this massive like mecca for miniatures game hobbyists and the games and everything. So being able to like come in and show off the game in front of like this group of people, this amazing community, and so many different communities.
For real.
You know, we had to take the opportunity. It was really exciting that it all worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. So Taylor and I got a demo yesterday a little bit.
Yeah.
Cannot talk or cannot say how like just like giddy about this game. We're super stoked for it. We're ready to double down real hard on the Shatterpoint. But so some of the questions that so on the trip here, took a 15-passenger van. We're driving 13 hours to get here. We're just thinking, all right, well, we might get an opportunity to get a demo. What questions should we ask? And the first one that came up, and I think it might be the most important, is as far as inside the AMG offices. Do you do mock lightsaber battles? And if so, who is the current reigning champion?
Okay, so I'm not entirely certain if this is covered under the NDA, but because we're being casually professional,
correct.
I will break it. We did have a moment where when we went to visit the LFL in their offices, we made a trip to Galaxy's Edge, and we all built lightsabers. And I'm going to be honest with you, based on their choices and the way they made the lightsabers and the way they handled them afterwards, I'm clearly the superior lightsaber duelist.
All right.
I'm the only one who studied the forms.
Right.
The rest of them, they just kind of wave them around like they're glow sticks at a rave.
Well,
and I'm like, all I have to do is just poke you.
And I have to be honest. So looking at some of the styles and forms and stuff that are on there's obviously been a lot of care in which form are people using and in what era, at what point in their kind of career and character development. Tell me a little bit about that. So obviously you guys are huge fans of the source material.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've learned a lot over the course of working on the game. And one of the big things that to me was really important in the design and then overall with all of us with the development was, you know, it's about creating that experience. We want when you go to the table and you put your miniatures down that you've created and made your own Star Wars Strike Force with, like we want you to feel like you're playing out movies or like the shows on the table, right? You want to see that cinematic action. And one of the big things with Star Wars that I've always loved is the fact that combat in Star Wars is not just like an action-packed sequence of events. It's very often, when it's done well, used as a storytelling device. So you watch the way in which the battles unfold or the duels unfold from the very like stoic and kind of classic samurai style of the original like Death Star, Obi-Wan versus Vader when they meet again, to like more dynamic battles like on Mustafar when Obi-Wan and Anakin are fighting. you learn so much about the characters and how they approach combat and what they're doing. You know, hand shooting first is one of the most popular controversies, right? And why is that so important to people who, if he shot first, if he didn't, why does that change matter? And it's because it tells you so much about the character. The fact that Han Solo is like,
is he a rebel or a scoundrel?
If he shoots first, you know, now you know this man is not gonna, he's not gonna take chances, and he's not afraid to take an advantage when he sees it. And that's something we really wanted to get into Shatterpoint. So in order to do that, we took a lot of our complexity budget, a lot of our design time, and we poured it into making combat feel super impactful, super dynamic, and very different from a lot of the other like standard miniatures games experiences.
Yeah.
Because that to us was kind of the heart and soul of the game.
And that, I think that bleeds through actually really well as well. So in kind of the flow of combat, it seems like movement's actually very heavy. After the demo yesterday, having a lot of attacks result in pushes and shoves and jumps, it seems like when an activation starts for a character, they could really kind of end up anywhere.
Yeah. There's, I think Asajj Ventress, between her double jumps and all of the different movements, she can actually cross the entire table from deployment to deployment if everything goes her way.
Yeah.
And you wanted to do that. But again, it just kind of goes back to the idea of, you know, the game experience you're trying to encapsulate is one that is very kinetic, very dynamic, and also kind of chaotic, right? And I think this is a big kind of difference when you look at, okay, Star Wars Legion versus Star Wars Shatterpoint. They're both tabletop miniatures games. Yes, one is character focused, one is like more army focused, but the kind of player skills and the abilities that you're looking at using and the tactics that you're flexing are very different. Whereas Legion is more of a, you know, classic like command and control, high strategic level. I'm trying to make sure that I'm executing my plan as much as I can.
Yeah.
Shatterpoint is the plan's already gone completely to the garbage can, and now you're just kind of dealing with that moment of chaos in the show. And even in the mission pack and the cards themselves, we kind of tried to replicate that. So one of the fun little like Easter eggs in terms of how the mission packs operate and the different struggles is we structured them so that the first struggle is the setup. The second struggle is the complication, and the third struggle is kind of the resolution. So in the demos, it's like your setup is you're stealing the secret plans. So one side is obviously trying to steal secret plans, the other side's probably trying to stop them. And then you get the whole like, we've been double crossed. That's the complication. And now the mission has changed and more chaos unfolds. And then if you get past that, it's like, we need a new exit. Because, you know, the double cross, they blew up our ship, or they shut the doors on us, and now we have to get out. And again, it was really evoking that sense of like a 30-minute animated show where your characters are going through this and they're kind of reacting and adapting to the situation as it's given to them.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, you know, some characters have been knocked out or have mysteriously vanished, and they'll be back next week.
So I really like that too. So, and that kind of plays into the combat tracker and the struggle tracker, right? So there's that constant back and forth, and things are getting dire, they're getting more serious, kind of based on how that flow goes. Is there kind of a design philosophy behind the struggle tracker and really kind of doubling down on making that feeling of like things are getting tense and we really need to step up our game?
Yeah, like, so the struggle tracker was an interesting mission design in general is one of the hardest things that you ever have to do in I think any game, but especially like tabletop games, right? There's so many different X factors, and it's obviously the focus of like how you win a game is really important. Otherwise, it's kind of not a game. And we started with a lot of different ideas, and we naturally came to the struggle tracker and the tug of war style, because we did really want players to feel and have a visual representation of kind of the push and pull of your actions and how well you're doing versus how well your opponent is doing, and get that desperation in there. And so, you know, balancing the game and the way scoring worked around that idea of like every player's scoring every turn, and it's pulling this token back and forth, and then developing momentum around that. So we always knew once we came to the struggle tracker, we said, okay, we need a way to shorten it. We need a way to like put the impetus on the players that they have to play. And they have to engage really quickly, otherwise they're going to lose the struggle.
Yeah.
But we also need kind of comeback mechanics. You don't want to have it be a foregone conclusion, because the best experiences, whether they're Star Wars media or a game, are the ones that have undetermined outcomes, right? Like knowing that there's a possibility that you can come back, that you can do something dramatic and shift things in your favor. And so momentum became part of that. And, you know, the ways you gain momentum by wounding an enemy character is very active. But then there are things like both players gaining a momentum token and a track shortening when you score, but you hit 0. Because now both sides are like, wait a minute, no, this has to, we got to keep moving, we got to push harder. And then giving that final comeback mechanic or that little bit of kickback to a player that doesn't pull the tracker over to their side, but giving them that momentum to show that their side is becoming more desperate and going to push harder, it gives that nice balance of like, you're never out of it.
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing with the 3 struggle system is the fact that at some point, you as a player have to make the determination of like, am I going to keep fighting for what I believe is a lost cause, or am I going to set myself up to take the next round? And if I can do that, then we're going to go to sudden death in that 3rd struggle. And it's going to come down to that. And, as you play the game more and more, and I think as players start to develop these strategies and these different tactical approaches, it's really neat to see how players, approach that stuff. We have certain playtesters in the office who they will never concede a struggle. They will go to the bitter end, and they'll never. And then and oftentimes, sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. And then there are players who very quickly will analyze the situation and be like, I don't think I can win this. Therefore, I will just start planning for the next struggle. Yeah. And they'll let that one go. And the payoffs and the setbacks from each of those is very interesting. And so I think that becomes like one of those like developing game skills where you have to be able to analyze the situation and say, which one is best for me? And knowing when to exercise that is really interesting. And it leads to this very dynamic and engaging experience where it's like, we need to regroup, we need to push harder, and how are you going to do that on the tabletop?
So, and one thing that I think kind of exemplifies that too, when you're taking actions in Shatterpoint, you can't repeat actions.
Correct.
So tell me a little bit about that as far as that design philosophy where you can't attack twice, you can't move twice, and kind of how that ended up coming into the game.
So, a lot of it was part of the moving conversation, like where do you start and where do you go? But one of the things that, because Shatterpoint has such an emphasis on combat, and combat resolution is a bit more weighty due to the way the combat trees work and how much stuff happens, we knew that from a time perspective and just from an experience perspective, like watching your opponent do 2 attacks over and over again was not going to be that enjoyable.
Right.
Additionally, we wanted the game to have that high dynamism. We wanted to see a lot of movement. We wanted to see a lot of things occur on the tabletop where characters were bouncing around. And additionally, we had this really strong desire to see the squads and the strike teams function like a traditional unit in a mass army game. So you're taking these different characters, and I think this is one of my favorite parts about Shatterpoint, and it's one of the funnest things to show people in the demos and stuff, is like, yes, you're going to activate one character, and then you're like, oh, but this character has a tactic, so you get to choose one of these characters to move. And then this character has an ability that says that this character gets to make a move and an attack, and and then because this character did this, like you get to start to see this Rube Goldberg machine where instead of individual characters doing individual things, if you decide to craft your squads and your strike teams around some of these synergistic abilities, you really start to see how the squad feels like a squad. Yeah. And one character's activation matters for so many more things. And there's nothing more exciting than being like, I activate Gar Saxon, and watching those Mandalorians just start going,
yeah, right?
And you're like, this is so cool. And I think that to me was one of those, like, it was one of those aha moments with the experience. And again, this all kind of ties back to the fact that because we wanted so much kind of non-active activation stuff, having characters not be able to do things multiple times allowed the freedom and the time within the game experience to do that and make it more impactful and not make it feel oppressive, right? Like if you imagine, like, because you played the demo last night, and Kalani does a lot with the battle droids, and he lets the B1s make an attack out of activation, and he attacks out of activation. There's a lot of movement. You can't, it's like, it would be really a different experience and probably not a good one if Kalani just got to do that twice, right? If he got to attack twice. So limiting that really opened things up. It also, I think, was key, and it unlocked a different thing, which was because movement became restricted to once per turn, those squad-based abilities and their combinations opened us up to be able to do things like Roger on Kalani, or to do things like force speed or force jump, where each character, you'll notice in Shatterpoint, almost always has some kind of movement ability, whether it moves themselves for a force because it's an active ability, or it's a tactic ability that moves something else. And that makes up for, in a really intriguing and tactical way, the fact that you can only move once, right? And it makes that force pool and how you're spending those resources become much more critical and much more interesting.
Now, as far as, because there's been a lot of care, right, done into making the characters really feel like the characters. Mm-hmm. Is there a character that you really identify playing as that is your play type versus a favorite character from media or canon? But I mean, in the game that you just really, I love playing this character because it plays the way I like to play.
I feel like you're digging for spoilers here because I've played a lot more characters than we've shown. So I think, oh man. So my favorite character from the stuff that we've shown and announced at the show is Count Dooku.
Yeah.
And he was what personally in Star Wars, I like the character of Count Dooku, but he's not what I would call my favorite Star Wars character, just from the character perspective. But I had so much fun working on his initial designs and then going through like the stuff with playtesting and development, because I was really able to lean into Count Dooku's like his signature sense of superiority, as the meme goes. And he became this very like counter character where he punishes your opponent for doing things that they want to do, but additionally he can force them to make bad plays.
Yeah.
So like he can use his signature look of superiority to force your opponent to do actions that actually aren't beneficial to them and benefit you. And I thought that was really fun, and it fit the character really well. And I really like making Josh like shake his fists and all of like his rage anytime I can do that, it's a win.
Yeah.
But to give a little spoiler, which is probably not a super spoiler, the character that I love playing because I identify with the most, and he's also my favorite Star Wars character, is Cad Bane.
Okay.
Like, I love playing Cad Bane, and it was so much fun to get to work on him and create like that character and all the things that he gets to do. And we did some really fun things with his squad and the way in which they interact in the game and everything that I'm excited for people to see.
Yeah.
But it was a blast. Like I had so much fun, and I have only been painting the good guy characters. But the second that Cad Bane comes in, I'm like, you got to give him to me. I'm painting him, and I'm going to play him like all the time.
He's an absolute personal favorite of mine too. I know in chat, there's been a few people who've been like, wait, but what about Bane though?
Yeah, like 100%, 100%.
And then, so are we going to see, like, so one of the big things that's really helped, I think, a lot of communities out there are kind of the organized play kits and events. Is there anything like that planned for Shatterpoint? Is that something we have to look forward to, or any type of co-op version of the game?
So initially, obviously, organized play, really big thing for us. There are going to be kits, like event kits that you see. They're going to be coming out. There'll be some unique scenarios, obviously, that lean into the narrative, and we'll be building on that. One of the big things that we're doing just to start, though, and that you'll start seeing throughout, not only for Shatterpoint, for many of our other games, is we really want to design a system, because every community is different, right?
Yeah.
Some communities, they just want to come, play, have a good time, and not worry about bracketing or, who takes first, who takes second, whatever. Some communities, they really love the challenge of skill, and they like coming together and knowing that they're going to have X number of games. They're scheduled out in rounds, and somebody's going to cut to the top 1, 2, 3. So from our perspective, like, we want to encourage communities. We just want to encourage play. Yeah. Like, whatever is right for your community, whatever is right for your play group that makes everybody happy and enjoy the game experience on the table, we want to support that. And one of the best ways that we've identified for doing that is simply by making kind of prize packs that we can provide to retailers and stores and conventions that are just full of cool things like alternate cards, foils, and things like that. And then the rule is basically use it however your community wants it. If you want to use it to support a tournament, do that. If you want to use it to support like just an open play night, do that. If you want to use it for a painting night or a hobby night, you can do that too. Okay. And I think providing these great resources for their communities to use in a way that's going to benefit the community the best. And always we're going to provide, ideas and advice on how we think the communities can be built and all that stuff. We're going to do what we can to help grow. And I think a balanced approach is always good, right? Yeah. You're going to have players who just want to come in and have that enjoyable, like, relaxed, casual experience. You're going to have players who want to have that tournament experience. You should always try to make sure that you're balancing everyone's wants and needs. But every community is going to have a different percentage of that.
Absolutely.
And the people who know best are not us. They're you. They're you in the store. They're your store owners. They're your EOs and things like that. Yeah. And so that's one of the things I'm really excited about from organized play perspective. But you will see, those unique scenarios. You will see other things. Maybe you'll see some new game modes in the future as the game establishes itself and we move forward. one of our big mantras at Atomic Mass Games is we always want to look for ways to add the most value we can to the collections of players, and that often can be through organized play, events, it can be through competitive play, it can be through new things like multiplayer experiences, team experiences, all of that stuff. So we're going to continue to work on that stuff. You're going to see more of it come out and all of those good things as we continue, and that will be throughout all the game lines.
Awesome. So I absolutely love that. That was one of the things I was really hoping for, because I think it's incredibly versatile what organized play kits can do, as you've said, for all sorts of different communities. Everyone wants a little something different out of the same game.
Absolutely.
And being able to check every single box, regardless of what you're looking for, is incredibly impactful. One question that comes up a lot, at least in chat, as far as like constructing your strike team, when you go to a game or an event, are you bringing just your two strike teams, forces?
Squads? Yeah.
Or are you bringing a couple and you're able to kind of format it out of
in the base game experience, right? You just construct your strike team of the two squads, and you choose a mission pack. And obviously at launch, there's only one mission pack, so that's an easy choice.
Yeah.
But there will be additional mission packs in the future.
Okay.
And that's all you bring. So there's no like flex list customization like in Crisis Protocol.
Yeah.
It's very much more traditional, where like you're making your choices and then you're coming to the game and you're going to use those throughout.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be formats in the future that have like sideboards or other kinds of things. One of the great things about Shatterpoint and the way that list construction works is because each squad is self-contained, you can come to a game with multiple squads, and then you simply have to stick two of those together, right? And you're ready to go.
Yeah.
So I would definitely say I would expect to see new formats that play with that have a sideboard experience. But from a the base game experience, the way in which most players will play and the way the rule book is structured, you build your strike team, you take your mission pack that includes with it, you go to the table and you play the game.
Perfect. So as far as, kind of following up off of strike teams, so what inspired the decision to not have strike teams limited to one particular faction or keyword, and to kind of open that up so as long as it's within the same era, you can bring them together?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's this very difficult tension, right? Where you want an experience that can be played in a canonical sense, right? We all have these impulses to be like, I want to relive, or I want to kind of take my shot at things that I've seen on screen or in other media and recreate it, right? And I think that's a strong impulse in all of us. But the other thing too is like we're all fans of many things throughout the different eras and the different media of Star Wars, right? And when it's possible, to me, I feel like because of the creativity that's involved in miniatures games and the way in which we get to tell stories that are our own, and we get to engage in kind of the sandbox of the galaxy itself, if it makes sense for the game and the theme, allowing players that flexibility to kind of make their own experiences. And most importantly to me is like the worst feeling is when somebody says, I love this character. And you're like, okay, well, he doesn't work for them.
Right.
So, and then they're like, so I can't get him unless I get that other thing. And you're like,
feels bad.
Yeah, sorry. Like that's the way it is. So if you can create a structure, you create a game experience, and I think Shatterpoint is one of those, right? Because we're playing in kind of that animated, like wilder world where, team ups happen all the time. Yeah. And you have that flexibility to say, okay, you as a player get to construct your own narrative and your own story, and you get to play kind of in your own way, and we will put that on some rails, and we will put balance around it. Then that's incredible. And it doesn't work for every game, right? Like a game like Star Wars Legion, where you're looking at kind of a more macro level, where you have big armies and command and control and the strategies and everything is baked into the whole force, it just doesn't work. And that's okay. Like every game needs to be built to support the game experience that it wants. Right. In Shatterpoint, it really felt like just being like, you have to pick Galactic Republic or nothing, or you have to pick an era and stick with it. It was, you could say that, but it felt very arbitrary. It didn't matter to the core function of the game, the balance of the game, and it stripped away some of the fun that I think Shatterpoint really brings, which is in that living your wildest Star Wars moments. And we still got to put some things on rails. So we have the eras, which are, squad construction is a bit more limited because you have to pick your primary character determines your era, and you can't mix your eras. And the reason we did that was because one of the really exciting things from a design standpoint of Shatterpoint is because you only need to build a squad. It gives us so much freedom to do things that are more niche or less developed that are really cool, but not have to put a whole support system around them, right? Like you can do just, a Kylo Ren squad from the sequel trilogy. And if that's all you want to do, that's it. If you want to go back and maybe do something from, let's say, a Jedi Fallen Order squad, right? Like so many different areas of media where you'd say, I can't support an entire faction for this. I can't get a full strike team even out of it. Now we have that capability to do it because we can just say, okay, well, this squad works here, and you can combine it with a different squad. And if those are your favorite characters and that's how you want to play, you can do that. The other big thing too is that by putting the eras kind of around it, design space is not infinite. It's really big, but it's not infinite, right? At some point, you're going to create units or characters that kind of do what another character does. And that might be really important, or they'll be so similar that then players are like, well, but this one's just better. So by having the era tag, it allows us to make things in the different eras that fulfill similar roles, but in slightly different ways, or have some amount of overlap. But they're more important because they belong to that era. So if you want to take care of other units from that era, you're now not looking at which one's the best one that does this thing. You're going, okay, what in this bucket, this smaller bucket, is the best one that I want to take, or the one that fits what I want to do better. And so that allows us, the freedom to be able to make all the cool things and make them canonically correct and dive into the characters, but without saying, well, I'm never going to take this one because this one is just 0.576% better. Okay. And that's fine, right? Like you should be looking for efficiencies if that's what you want, but we also need to make sure that everything has a role, a function, and it has a meaningful choice to be made.
Well, and I think that's super important. So yesterday we covered the What If event for MCP, where it's specifically about literally just do whatever you want. And people love it. And why wouldn't you? You if you want to use a specific character to be able to bring it to something, if you really like them, it's a bad feeling to have to be limited in what you can do with it. So I think that's a great way to do it personally, and chat certainly agrees with you. So speaking of that, as far as characters in different eras, we've seen that there's going to be 2 Ahsokas kind of in the initial launch. Is that something, without spoiling or anything, or giving us stuff you don't want to, is that effectively something that's going to be pretty freeform, and that you're going to have kind of regularly multiple editions of the same character at different eras during their career?
Yeah, I think, well, it's definitely something that right off the bat the game is designed to do, right? Because a lot of the biggest names in Star Wars, right? They have multiple movie and show arcs. And to try to take all of that and condense it down into a single version of that character, one is just daunting and scary, and I don't want to do it. But 2, it's a real disservice to people who love the character or who love a specific point in the character. And you want that freedom and that flexibility to say, okay, let's explore what these characters are like in different points in their career. Let's explore how things change over time, because I think that's one of the things in these galaxies like Star Wars that becomes really compelling, is that you get to grow with the character. Like Ahsoka Tano, right? If you watch the Clone Wars animated show, and now even some of the later Mandalorian media, we've watched this character grow from a tween all the way to a grown adult, to Gruda, and that to me is you got to do it, right? You have to give yourself the space to do it. Now, does that mean that we'll get every single instance of every single character? No, it probably not. I would love to, but I doubt we'll get that far. But having that opportunity and that flexibility to do it is really key, and I think it's really exciting, because the other thing that Shatterpoint is really built around in that squad building, and go back to squad building for a second, you always have to have your primary, your secondary, and your supporting. And right there, we have this opportunity to create the same character, but that fills different roles. Right. So when you're like, well, I want to play an all Jedi squad. I don't want any clone troopers. I just want Jedi. Eventually, as the game continues to expand, you might get to play all the names. You might get to play only clones, right? You'll have those abilities because we're able to slot characters into different spots. Right. And allow players to build those squads of their dreams and have them be meaningful.
Correct.
Because the abilities are different, the role that they fill is different. And so I think one of the really neat things and what was exciting about being able to do the preview version of Ahsoka, which is the same Ahsoka for anyone who's worried that's coming later in another product, in a future product. So if you don't happen to get the Hobby Next version, which is just a preview, you will have the opportunity within a certain amount of time after the game's release, and I think it's like 6 months or something. But it's pretty close. Because
I think that's huge too. It's a sign of relief from a lot of people.
We tried to keep it as close as possible, and obviously there's like logistics and shipping things that can always happen because the world is chaotic and weird.
Yeah.
But the intention was never that you were going to have to wait a long time if you missed out on her, but that there would be some exclusivity in terms of getting her early, and then after that you'd be good to go. But it's really exciting that players will get to see that right away. Like, what does Padawan Ahsoka do that primary Ahsoka Jedi No More doesn't?
Yeah.
How do those fit into my squads? Which one do I prefer? And what am I doing with those different things, right? And so that comes back to like the whole like having different versions of the characters. In addition to exploring new characters, just having them fill a different role in squad building is huge, and it's super impactful, and it's really interesting.
So I have just a couple more questions for you, but I'm sure they're all going to be long ones. One of the things that we've really liked just from AMG as a whole are the weekly transmissions, and as far as how characters are kind of revealed, where you get maybe a teaser or a silhouette, and then a little bit of the character information, and then a little more. Will we kind of see that same format for Shatterpoint?
I would assume so. So I don't have a lot of say over marketing decisions.
I gotcha.
But I think that format, which is one that we kind of developed very early on at Atomic Mass before we hired all of our amazing marketing folks and everything, and they've kind of adopted and made better and better. I think that's fun, right? Like getting the speculation. One of the best things in life is anticipation, right?
Correct, yeah.
Because it can be anything. It could be a boat,
You know how much we've always wanted one of those.
And so I think the anticipation, you can't discount that, right? Like watching people talk and discuss and have fun with it, and then you kind of drill down into it. I've broken you now with my boat combat, so I've won for my day. But yeah, so it's. I think again, it allows the community to engage and be excited, and then we slowly reveal that information, and then you get to see what the thing is, and then you get to have meaningful like conversations about where does it fit, is it broken, is it not broken, who knows? And you get all the cool hot takes, and then the thing finally comes out and people start playing with it, and then you get to go back and be like, well, that hot take was not very hot, and that hot take was pretty hot, and
it's a lot of fun from the content creation side, from just people at your local game store.
We have to keep you with content, and,
correct.
And if we broke that and we just gave you all the stuff right away and told you exactly how it was, what would you do?
Nothing.
You just have to be professional. You couldn't even be casual.
That's true. That'd be. I mean, we're ready for it, obviously, but. Yeah, I completely agree. Now, so this is a slightly mechanical question. The terrain, super impactful in this game, especially with movement and where people are and what people are doing. Now, I hope this isn't like digging for something, but I believe you had mentioned potentially that Shatterpoint terrain and Legion should be, for the most part, kind of designed with each other in mind.
So we wanted to make sure that we have these two great Star Wars games.
Yeah.
They are different scales, but the idea was we have this opportunity to really flesh out the Star Wars galaxy and get that stuff on the tabletop. And so we definitely took the opportunity to make sure that the terrain would function for both games.
Yeah.
And I think one of the really neat things about it from that is the fact that like when you start taking Legion units and you put them on the gantries, the way in which the measurements for the bases work and the width of those gantries actually allows for Legion to seamlessly fit its units on those gantries and function with them. And they also work for exactly what Shatterpoint needs. So we took a lot of pains to make sure that while the scale like isn't perfect for either, it feels right for both. And functionally from a game and tabletop perspective and a play perspective, it functions very well for both as well.
Yeah.
And my hope is that we start to see, through some of the changes to like how easy mobility up and down is in Legion, and kind of opening up the doors to allow for more terrain and elevation in that game, that this terrain will start to slot in better, and we'll see a lot more dynamism in terms of just the tabletops and I think it's really cool because much like in Shatterpoint, how terrain and elevation really affect strategy and tactics, the same is true in Legion, right?
Right.
Like, and allowing players more flexibility and the time to play and mess with that I think is going to be really cool to watch is how it creates new divergent strategies and new ways to approach battle that will become tactically and strategically interesting.
Beautiful. With such a massive pool of characters to pull from Star Wars, how do you even begin, or what's the philosophy as far as who do you go with first? Is it iconics first and then fleshing it out, or are you able to sneak in your favorites?
So, yeah, I think that's an interesting question, right? When it comes to like the core set of any game, you really you need those big names, you need the identifiable ones, right? I always call it the mom test, like because when you run up, when the mom sees it. When my mom sees it, she has to be able to be like, oh, it's Star Wars and I recognize most of these characters. Yeah. Right? And that's important because, you don't want to start with the obscure or the really deep cuts. Right. And not
like MODOK right out of the gate.
Right, because we want a community to be built. Well, we'll get to that in a second. Because I think MODOK is also important. You want people to be able to immediately identify, and you want to have like the widest community appeal possible. Yeah. Because miniatures games, especially in games in general, that you have to have an opponent to play against, right? You have to have a person to play against. You need that big community. You want to be able to find that game. Because we're spending all of our time, painting and assembling and making these awesome pieces of Star Wars like art.
Which I gotta say, the model sculpts are just really kind of incredible.
And we want the chance to be able to use that in play against other people who have done the same stuff. So you look at like the big names, but I also think, and this is to me super important, you don't only want to just focus on like the A-listers, because what makes Star Wars as a galaxy interesting is the fact that it is diverse, it is deep, and from a Star Wars community perspective, right, and for people who love the media, there are people who love a Riff Tamsin, if you will, a strange shark man who exists, right, and has a role, and like so. Putting that stuff in, it kind of fleshes out the game in a way that makes it feel real. And I think that's what good galaxies or universes, when you look at something that's been created, a created world, the more diversity, the more interest that's there, the more it feels like a real thing that you can dig into and you can live and you can experience. And I think that's important for the game too. We want people to understand that to us, these games are not just they're not just products, they're passions. And we want to try to do our best to represent that passion for the IPs and for the players and their love of these things, and to show that like we're in it. Like this is not, for us, this is not a one and done. Right. This is something that we're going to be diving into as deep as we possibly can, as long as we possibly can. We're going to do the research on the weird character that somebody out there desperately loves and is waiting for. And maybe that character is going to come a lot sooner than you think. And I love it when people are like, why would they do this person? Like, what are they thinking? Nobody cares about this person.
You don't,
and it sets the stage like nothing's off limits. We're gonna try to hit everything, and we're gonna keep a good balance. And on top of that, there's like this little sinister personal joy of whenever you can create a character that is kind of a deeper cut, and everyone says, and everyone comes over like, I can't believe they would do this. Why would they do this? And then the character releases and people start playing with it, either because they like the character or because they think the character's interesting or adds something unique. And then all of a sudden you start to see people like, I didn't know anything about this guy, but he's kind of cool on the tabletop. So I did a little research. He's pretty neat. Like, this person's done something. And I think that's awesome, right? Like, being able to expand people's enjoyment and understanding and love of something they already love, like even a little push of the passion. Like, there's nothing better, like, feeling wise. And it often happens to me. Like, a lot of times people are like, what about this? And I'm like, that person is lame. Why would we do that? Mostly when Josh says something, to be fair. And then, he keep at it. And then I'm like, fine, I will look it up. And I look it up and I'm like, okay, maybe I was wrong. How do I not tell Josh I was wrong though? Because I can't. There's a scoreboard. I have a scoreboard between me and Josh, and I've got to stay on top. So you're gonna cut this. Don't make sure he can't watch this. You have to make sure Josh can't watch this. This is all secret. This is between us. This is between us.
So very specifically, that's what I loved about the first wave of MCP. I don't want to talk about MCP too much, but when MODOK came out, I was like, yo, all right, like, let's go. And being able to, like you said, kind of dive into characters that I wasn't too familiar with has been an absolute joy. But anyway, so my final question here, because we got to get back to the
I see
the
they're
team
setting
battle.
up right now. You got more important things to do than talk to this schmo.
What was the inspiration for the title of Shatterpoint? Where did that come from?
I just told you I have a Josh scoreboard, and you're gonna make me ruin it. So naming a game is obviously like super hard. Everybody's got opinions, and you have to get through like multiple stages of approvals.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were going through the different names of Shatterpoint originally, and we had a couple that we really liked, and they got through several levels of approval, and then they went to kind of like the final checks. And those final checks are usually making sure that no one else has used it, right? Because you don't want to steal somebody else's name, and then it matters like where was it used and all this nonsense that I don't care about because it just ruins my day.
Right.
But Josh, when we were working on Mace Windu, of course, we knew about the book Shatterpoint, and we had done the research. And Josh is a huge Mace Windu fan, like, biggest Mace Windu fan ever. And as we were going through the naming thing, he was like, I really think you should just name the game Shatterpoint. I was like, but it's already an ability on this guy. Like, we're not going to do that, Josh. We're not going to have an ability and name the game after your favorite character's ability. Like, not doing it. And I was like, plus we already have these names, and these names are great. Anyway, so those names got trashed. They didn't work. And so we went back to the drawing board on the names for like the fourth time. And we're sitting there, we're talking. And like in the back of my head, I'm just hearing Josh like, Shatterpoint's a great name, Shatterpoint. And I was finally just like, and I thought about it. And the more I thought about it, having done the research for the ability for Mace Windu on Shatterpoints and having Josh tell me all about Shatterpoints, I was like, it became harder and harder to deny now that we had lost the names that we had originally liked, that the whole experience of the game and what we were doing with it and what we were trying to represent on the tabletop really was Shatterpoints. Like and then I fell in love with it. And so Josh was right. And so we named it Shatterpoint, and we got away with it. And I'll tell you a very secret story, which probably won't get me in trouble. But the way in which I got approval for Shatterpoint to be the name in order to convince everyone, because I had already said that I didn't think it was a great name and I had stricken it from the list, was they told me that if I sung a song about Shatterpoint, they would believe that I was really into it, and they would approve the name.
Okay.
So my song was Shatterpoint, and there you go. So,
all right. There's the sound bit.
That's the sweet tea right there.
Beautiful.
The sweet tea.
We're gonna get that bad boy on a soundboard. That's gonna be perfect. All right. Well, dude, I can't thank you enough for stopping by. We are just internally just so incredibly excited for Shatterpoint. Actually, being able to finally get our hands on it and see how it plays. We only saw one round of. Or one activation on each side, but I think I'm very excited to see the rest of it, and I'm super going to be staying tuned. So
awesome.
Thank you so much. And are we going to be getting maybe some more Shatterpoint information on Sunday?
Yes. I believe that at our panel, we're going to be covering kind of a roadmap for all of our games. So you don't want to miss that. That's going to be Sunday at noon in Nirvana A and B if you're at the show. And if not, I'm sure some professional casuals, as well as many other true professionals, will be covering it so that you know that it's not a boat, it's something else.
Yeah. And you know how much we've always wanted.
But it could be a boat, because you don't know yet.
You heard it here first. It could be a boat.
Could be a boat.
Dude, you know how much I've wanted one of those?
All right. Well, Will, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. All right, guys. We are going to be getting right into this round 3 of the team event. And if you haven't already, make sure to get over to the Worthy booth and the AMG booth to check out some Shatterpoint, maybe get a demo and look at some of the incredible art that has been up there for Shatterpoint. You can jump right by if you want to. I don't want to keep you up. Thank you so much for your time.